Okay, namaste and welcome everyone to this Sunday special of the Vivekananda Study Circle. I'm Uday Khankhoje, and it is my great honor and privilege to have today's conversation with Indu Ramchandani. So this is going to be a freewheeling conversation. We'll have a conversation first, and towards the end, we'll open it up for a Q&A session. So before we get started, I'd like to just read out a brief biography of Indu, which would give us some context of where she is coming from. So Indu Ramchandani was born in New Delhi in 1944, while most of the world was embroiled in the Second World War. She graduated with an honors in economics from Delhi University, although she tells me she wanted to do English instead, and followed it up with a postgraduate diploma in journalism. Subsequently, marriage and kids happened after college, but she kept up her interest in journalism and writing and further specialized in book editing and publishing. And this was to be her lifetime career, where she got to travel a lot and enjoyed a great deal of success and global recognition for her work. While she was at the Oxford and IBH Publishing Company, she received a national award for excellence in book publishing for a book on the Harappa civilization by Gregory Purcell. Subsequently, she was the chief editor South Asia for Encyclopedia Britannica, where she helped bring out a 7-volume Students Britannica on India, an encyclopedia on Hindi cinema, among other works. So, in the last 15 years or so, she has transitioned to being an editorial advisor and consultant. She has completed several freelance editing projects, such as for the UNICEF, UN Habitat, the International Commission for Physics Education, the American Institute of Indian Studies, and she's currently empaneled as a freelance editor for the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts and the UGC. More recently, she has co-authored a book, Life is As Is, Teachings from the Mahabharata, with Dr. Kavita Sharma, published by the Wisdom Tree. In the last several years, she's undertaken a Herculean task of transcribing, compiling, and publishing a series of books based on the lectures by and the study of scriptures with Pravrajika Vivek Prana, who is an ascetic of the Sharda mission. 14 books so far, titled Understanding Vedanta. Now, as it turns out, Indu has also lived a parallel life as a spiritual seeker. And in this conversation, we'll try to get her perspective on the interplay between professional life, spiritual life, the meaning of life, and how to cook the most delicious veg noodles in gravy. So, this is what I wanted to say by means of introduction. So, good morning, Didi. I understand you're
Good
joining
morning.
us from Edinburgh.
Yes, good morning, Uday. I'm in Edinburgh at 6:30 in the morning. It's dark and cold outside, but I'm very comfortable indoors. Thank
Very
you for
nice.
having me. My first question when you asked me was why me, and I still hold that. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. It sounds much larger than life.
Well, we'll just, as they say, we'll start from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about your early childhood and where it was.
Well, I was born in Delhi, stayed in Delhi all along, studied in Delhi, and had a very steady, stable childhood.
Uh-huh.
And interestingly, it was multifaceted as far as activities are concerned, and parents giving a very holy, religious, stable background. So
Mm-hmm.
there was my father reading the Guru Granth Sahib every morning and evening, and my mother reading the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana. Mahabharat was not allowed at
Oh,
home.
what's that?
There was this belief that Mahabharat at home causes unrest. So my mother had that very strong belief, and but Amar Chitra Katha was there. So
Nice.
read all of that, and it was interesting. Went on to college, as you said. You rightly pointed out, I took up economics honors only because my best friend's father was a great economist, and he sold me the idea that it was the subject. I
Oh,
hated it, but I graduated and then shifted to journalism because that was really what I wanted.
I see.
And then the thing was that I felt I should study further. I wanted to actually become a doctor when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But the traditions were you get married and settle down. And yes, the romantic notions of happily ever after, the prince and princess of the fairy tales also existed. And I got married, had a
Mm-hmm.
good life, two sons. And then things changed, and I knew I had to have a career. That was much later. And
Mm-hmm.
did a course in book publishing and editing to qualify, because there was a family business in book publishing.
I
So
see.
it was a perfect, good entry. And that was at Oxford and IBH Publishing Company.
I see.
Then professionally, things just opened up in the sense of Encyclopedia Britannica
Mm-hmm.
asking me to be the South Asia editor. I enjoyed that 5-year contract very much.
Mm-hmm.
It was challenging, there was a lot of travel,
Mm-hmm. You must have had a
and
very large team of staff to manage
we
for
had
such a time.
40, I had 40 editors working under me.
Oh,
It was
wonderful.
very challenging. And
Mm-hmm.
we did, as you said, the Students Britannica, which was the India content, because our job was to update all the South Asia content in the encyclopedia.
Mm-hmm.
The digital era had just come in, end of 90s,
Mm-hmm.
and but the published version was still very much there, which
Mm-hmm.
isn't now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was published, printed in China. So,
Oh,
yeah.
so made
So,
in China goes back a long way.
yeah, it was printed in China. So, had to travel there, get it printed. There was a lot of interesting travels, and among them was Israel,
I see.
which remained very important to me, because I took 2 days off to go to Jerusalem.
I see. Wonderful.
And walking down that Via Dolorosa, which is supposed to be the path where Jesus Christ was taken through
Mm-hmm.
before his crucifixion.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very fascinating. You know, when you travel, there are some things which remain imprinted in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
and this was one of them. So that
Right.
was my professional thing. And then when I finished that 5-year contract with Encyclopedia Britannica, I had turned 60, and somehow I had this mental thing that at some age I have to stop working and find myself in other directions.
Right, right. Well, before we get to that, I want to ask
Yeah.
you a little bit about your time as the South Asia editor. Uh, was it unusual for a woman to be in charge of such a big position at that time, or you had many colleagues who were?
It was very unusual, and it was, I think it was strange. Why, you see, Britannica was starting an India office,
Mm-hmm.
and they were looking for an editor,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no idea.
Okay.
But because I had been associated with the American Institute of Indian Studies,
Mm-hmm.
they had approached them to ask for suggest some names, and my name was suggested,
I see.
and went in for an interview, and it worked. And I got the job.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite a strange opening, because I had never expected it, never dreamt of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was great. It was a great experience in
Yeah.
traveling and dealing and meeting the wonderful editorial team at Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
My the worldwide editor, Dr. Dale Hoiberg, was a wonderful human being, and so was everyone working there. So it was a great interaction. Unforgettable time for me.
I see. I see. So, I mean, so you would it be correct to say that you didn't face a lot of difficulties on account of being a woman in this
No,
position?
I didn't actually. In Because there were women editors. The team in Chicago was, there was no such thing. There was no discrimination, and there were senior editors who were women.
Mm-hmm.
But in India, I was definitely one of the few
Mm-hmm.
at that kind of a post. But my editorial team comprised mostly women,
Hmm.
so that was great. We had
I
a
see.
great time there. Yeah, and there was no problem that way. Yeah.
I see. I see. Wonderful. And I believe that also that while you were pursuing this very active career in publishing, you were also very active as a theater artist,
Oh
or was
yes,
that much later?
that was my great hobby. It's, theater is a great stress buster,
Uh-huh.
and I've loved theater as a hobby. And I was part, and I still am a part of Yatrik Theater Group in Delhi.
Mm-hmm.
Joy Michael was. I'd met Joy Michael in college, and in those days when we did theater in college, in my college, Indraprastha College, boys were not allowed in
Oh.
for doing male roles. So I was tall and slim in those days. So I did all the male actor roles, and it was interesting. Yeah, so I held on to theater. It was great fun, and some of my greatest friends are from theater.
I see.
And even today, I would always go back on stage if I could.
Wonderful. And
Yeah.
I also found out that you acted in a Bollywood movie recently. How?
You can hardly say Bollywood film, but yes, one film called Dear Dad. I had a cameo role.
Uh-huh.
Good fun. Went to Dehradun for the shooting. It was a 5-10 minute role for which we shot for 2 days,
Uh-huh.
and yes, a great experience. But that's it. That's where
Okay.
it ended. I
I
haven't
see.
taken up anything more after that.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So let's continue your professional trajectory after you completed your publishing stint. What did you do next?
Yeah, I then decided to be on my own and
Mm-hmm.
start my own setup. And because the most interesting thing is that in 2005, before this, I have to tell you that I had met up with Ramakrishna Sharda Mission. My acquaintanceship with Ramakrishna Sharda Mission was way back in the 70s.
I see.
And the Delhi center was headed by Pravrajika Atma Mataji, and Pravrajika Vivek Mataji was there. So
Mm-hmm.
I started attending once a week classes of study with her.
Mm-hmm.
And that became a very, very important part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so when I started when I was on my own from 2004, actually from 2001, the Pangot Center, Pangot is in Nainital,
Mm-hmm.
near Nainital, and the center of the Ramakrishna Sharda Mission started there. So I had started going there regularly. Pravrajika Vivek Pranaji had set up that center.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started studying with her, and we were doing retreats.
Mm-hmm.
That's when what I studied with her was so important for me that I felt that these things need to be shared,
I see.
because we were doing the scriptures, and but she explains in such a simple, straightforward manner for all of us to understand. And I realized that in the contemporary world, not many of us read the original scriptures. We can't. We don't know Sanskrit, and at the same time, it seemed like heavy
Mm-hmm.
to read the Upanishads or read. And we were studying those. So that's when I started recording, transcribing, editing, compiling, and got the permission to start publishing. And that's how the Understanding Vedanta series started. That
Okay.
was the
I see.
next phase of my publishing, was to do those books.
Right. Right. Right.
As you mentioned, there are 14 already.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been great, because that was and is a pure labor of love. And I think they're being well appreciated. People do read them. We study them with Mataji even now.
Mm-hmm.
And all over in the US, etc. They've all read them, and they
I
sell
see.
them there. So it's a great project.
Okay. So this
Very,
is
very meaningful.
something I'd like to build upon as we go along. But
Yeah.
there is just a couple of questions, particularly for some in the audience who might not be very familiar. Everyone has heard of the Ramakrishna Mission, but you mentioned the Ramakrishna Sharda Mission. Can you just briefly tell us what is the difference?
It's the women's order of the Ramakrishna. The originally was, as you know, Swami Vivekananda started the Ramakrishna Mission in Math, but he
Mm-hmm.
had this great vision of a women's order. He
Mm-hmm.
talked about it, and in fact, he had even pointed out to the land across the river, which would be the center. Several years later,
I see.
uh, in 1953, the Ramakrishna Mission was started. Ramakrishna Sharda Mission and Mutt was started with
I see.
at Dakshineshwar. And this is the women's monastic order. It's an independent order.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a women's monastic order, as I
Right.
said. It's probably the only one of its kind in the world.
Wonderful. Okay. So we before we go more into the Vedanta books which you spoke about, this is a question which I think a lot of people will relate to who are in contemporary life, in their working professional life, which is that how did you arrive at spiritual texts or any of these things? Was it out of curiosity, or was it born out of a kind of a hunger or a need? What brought you to it?
Um, a very simple and the most common way of we get to something is when life gives you some blows.
Hmm.
That is the most common and ordinary way, I think, for people like us. I was very much a woman of the world. very much a family person and a social person. I still am over social, but anyway, the point is that sometimes, uh, often with all of us, we get hit by something that changes your pattern of life. And then there are two directions. One is you get despondent and say, "Oh, life is terrible," and you have to deal with it, and you kind of drag yourself through life. The other is no, there has to be another way, and that other way is it just. I believe a lot in destiny, by the way. Though I am professional and though I am Vedantic in my approach, things fall into place. And it was almost like providential. I was in Pune, and I'm talking of mid 70s, and I met Pravrajika Yoga Pranamataji, who was the head of the Pune Center. And I had no idea what Ramakrishna Sharda mission was, though I knew that Sharda Ma was the spiritual consort of Sri Ramakrishna. But I knew only about Swami Vivekananda, actually, because I had read about him and read his works, excerpts. So from there, it was like, "Where do you stay?" Mataji asked me, and I said, "I stay in Horse Cars in Delhi." She said, "Oh, our Delhi center is right there. You should go there." So at that time, I was going through a lot of turbulence. I had a suspected brain tumor, and the family life was in a state of turbulence. And so I came back, went to the Delhi center, and Atma Prana Mataji said, as I walked in, "Esho, now you have come to mother's home and everything will be fine." And when you're in a disturbed state of mind, someone makes a statement like that, it's like almost, there's something, a voice beyond the mundane, right? And after that, I didn't look back. It's just been a great support, and that's when the study of Vedanta actually started.
I see. So, if it were not for the particular situation in which you found yourself in life, do you think it would have been a different reception that you would have afforded to these?
Possibly, because the thing is that, well, as I mentioned, that the background of religion was there in childhood, and so the belief in God was there definitely, but it was a strange kind of belief which a lot of us have. It's like I always laugh at myself that before an exam, you walk in and say, "Oh God, please make sure the paper is easy." And then you think about it and you say, "But the paper was set 2 months ago by someone else. God can't do anything about it." So you have this belief that everything God can solve because you don't want to solve it, right? So there was this situation as we grew up, and I think most of us have this, that we say, when things don't seem so great, we pray to God. If they don't work out somehow, if not God, then someone has to be blamed. But you come to a stage where it's not going to be like that, okay? And that's when you start realizing, I hope we all do realize, is that you're on your own. And if you're on your own, then you've got to have a different approach to life. And it was Ramakrishna Sharda mission which put me on that track.
I see. So the person who said Esho to you is Atma Prana Mataji.
Atma Prana Mataji.
So
right.
Tell us a little bit about her.
It's very difficult to talk of a person of, her caliber. She was just one of the most sensitive, most caring, most erudite human beings I've ever known. And she was the mother figure. She brought you in, she took charge of you almost like, she was so involved with everyone. Whoever came felt special with her. Whoever came into that center felt special with her. And she, awareness, she made me aware of a lot of things in life, and she gave me an encouragement right through. And she's done that with everyone who was associated with her. So a mother figure who's beyond being a mother, much more.
I see. Wonderful.
And she passed a few years ago, but she was a great pillar of support to not only me, but everyone who came to know her.
Right. So we're talking about the 70s, right?
Yeah, I met her in the 70s.
Right.
And I was associated with her and with Vivek Pranaji since then.
I see. So at that time, I guess the center was just starting up?
The Delhi Center started in early 70,
I see.
and I joined in the late 70s.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
And
just so
then
happened we were living right behind the center, so it took me a few years to even know about it. And the mind, one wasn't on that plane
track.
of thought, and life was on a different kind of track all along.
Uh-huh.
And so this kind of, it was almost like I was pulled into it,
Uh-huh.
and I believe that. So it was
I see.
important. It is
I see.
important. Mm.
I see. So then progressing from there, I mean, I believe that you started also traveling then with Vivek
Yes, so
Pranav?
2005,
Mm-hmm.
Vivekananda had been traveling abroad since late 90s. In fact, she attended the 1993 centenary of the Parliament of Religions.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, she'd been abroad very often, quite a few years. And then in 2005, she was making this trip, and I was just so fortunate that I could accompany her.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Europe, we went to Germany, then we went to Uruguay in South America, and then we went to the US. It was a nice long 2.5 month, 3 month trip. And she was conducting retreats at the various places.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an immensely great learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
And traveling with her, it was a understanding of a different dimension, traveling with her and hearing her and being with her. So in 2005 we did that, and then we traveled again. And in 2013, when the Swamiji's centenary was, 150 years was happening, we were invited to Australia, was being
Mm-hmm.
celebrated. We were invited to Australia and the US.
Mm-hmm.
And so we traveled then, and then we traveled in 2016, which was
Mm-hmm.
the last time that Vivek Banerjee just went abroad.
Okay,
She
so let me
said,
just rewind a little bit. So, on
yeah.
your earlier journeys, for the first time when you accompanied her, how did the common people of, let's say, Uruguay respond to this? These women from the east coming and talking about a very strange concept. How did they respond?
No, no, the Uruguay has the center there, and she had traveled there before.
I see.
So they knew her. She'd been to Brazil and Argentina and Uruguay. So uh, for me, it was the first time, and it was a great experience because there's a small group of ladies who are very devoted to the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And they had invited her earlier, and they invited us again at that time. And
Mm-hmm.
so we stayed in the home of one of the devotees.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there for quite a few weeks, 2, 3
Mm-hmm.
weeks. And there were retreats being held.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this, talking of theater, I'm bringing theater back here.
Mm-hmm.
Because we used to have a tradition, we still have that when we have a retreat, then on the last day we would do a little variety entertainment program uh,
Mm-hmm.
as a Guru Dakshina
I
to
see.
Mataji.
Uh-huh.
And so in Uruguay, we had a show, not a show, but amongst ourselves. And they did the scenes of the chapter of Bhagavad Gita,
Mm-hmm.
Arjuna's Vishad, his despondency before the
Mm-hmm.
war starts. And it was in Portuguese and Spanish. They were going to the actors, and I was told you have to act, and I said, listen, I don't know the language. They said, no, you do Dhritarashtra. So I did Dhritarashtra, and I had to learn 2 sentences. The first sentence of when Dhritarashtra asked Sanjay, tell me what's happening on this bhumi, on this
Uh-huh.
karma bhumi. And so I learned that, and I was so nervous because even that one sentence seemed like difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But this was the fun part of those kind of retreats. So I just remembered that of doing Dhritarashtra and speaking one line in Spanish.
Right, right. So, I mean, we also have a lot of youngsters here on the call. So, I want to ask something which might be a question that they have. You here in what you're describing, you're traveling in person with an ascetic, and if you have any questions or doubts, you get to ask them directly to her or many
Yeah.
others. Whereas for most professional working people or college students, that opportunity is often not there, and it's often seen as something extremely distant. There are these people out there who wear clothes of different colors, and how does one even approach them? So for the most part, one is left to reading books, right? You go into a bookshop and you have the, unfortunately categorized under self-help, you have all of these various books and so on. How would you describe the difference between learning about you know something deeper from the books as opposed to learning about it from a living person?
Oh, there's no comparison. There's no comparison. When when you're living with in close proximity with someone, or if you are listening to someone directly, there's a big difference, because questions rise all the time, don't they?
Yeah.
So if you have a question and you ask it there and then, the clarity you get makes a big difference. Whereas to when you read, those questions remain embedded in our mind, and they perhaps remain questions, or if you're fortunate, you can seek the answer and come to your own conclusions, but it doesn't necessarily answer exactly the way you want to know, right? So a personal contact makes a big difference. Or mine has been a very, very special, fortunate journey to have been in such close proximity with an erudite, realized soul like Vivekananda. But for anyone who attends classes, you listen to Maharaj very often.
Right.
And so if you can ask him there and then what is bothering, what is on your mind, it makes a big difference, doesn't it? So
Yes.
definitely listening to people who have all this knowledge, which they're ready to share with us, is a totally different experience.
Right.
And that's why today's era with technology, the fact that you can be in touch with anyone, anywhere, makes a big difference to being only reading books. And that was, as I mentioned earlier, was the reason why I brought out these Understanding Vedanta books, because Mataji was taking these live classes, retreats, and whatever she was explaining, we were also questioning, in the sense that there were discussions. They were based on discussions. It wasn't just a talk that she gives. That's not her nature. She wants to have a discussion. And the outcome was that a lot of questions that we raised, which she answered, I was able to incorporate into the text of the book. So that makes a big difference, in the sense that if something was bothering me and I didn't understand, and if I checked it and I got an answer and I could put it into the book, it meant that it gave clarity for another lay person like me.
I see.
Yeah.
So could you give me an example, maybe a very simple example of something which you struggled with as a young woman to understand, and everything, all the popular media and culture around you gave you a certain answer, and you could only learn the correct answer to it after coming into contact with wise men and women?
Yeah, okay. See, initially, when things went wrong, or for anyone, when things go wrong, you don't get what you want, or it's almost like life is turning upside down or something. Where do you go? You'll talk to friends who can empathize, support, advise, tell you what's wrong, etc. But it's almost like ye theek ho jayega. It'll get all right. Life moves on, and you get these very standard responses. It's like when you lose a loved one, right? Now, someone tells you this happens, death is inevitable, life goes on, and that doesn't take away the pain. That doesn't take away the pain. And if something has gone wrong and you've had a disastrous event in your life, just being told that yeah, hota hai, this is unfortunate, etc., is not a consolation. I think this is my experience, right?
Right.
The consolation is to know that, is to try and understand why and where and what is the outcome. In the sense that why this happened, I'll use Vivekananda Mataji's words. We have a zoom lens vision, and we have to go into a wide angle vision.
Right.
If something has happened to you, take a physical illness, a business disaster, you lost all your money. all those kind of disasters are being faced by all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Life-threatening illness, business collapsing. In today's day and age, in the last few years, we've seen what's happened with the
Right.
pandemic.
Yeah.
To be told that this happens is not enough till you realize that this is what life is.
Mm.
And you realize that this is not, I'm not the only one.
Mm.
That's the first thing. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot be the only isolated human being in this world on whom the heavens have fallen and disaster has hit.
Mm.
Zillions of people face
Mm-hmm.
the same issues.
Mm-hmm.
So what does it tell you? That doesn't tell you any. That doesn't mean that there is no sorrow and there is no joy. It's there. It's for everybody, and these are phases. And that's when you realize that this is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
There's a transitoriness. There's nothing permanent. Our griefs come from permanence, the expectation of permanence.
I see.
Our fears are connected with losing this permanence. And
Mm.
these are things that you have to grow with. You have to understand and build them into your life. So I feel that the greatest tragedy in our life is the concept of fear.
Mm. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get
So
fearless, you face it all.
right. So actually, yeah, you've uttered the buzzword of this age, I would say, which is fear. So if you're comfortable, if you could tell us a little bit more about your tryst with fear when it came to your brain tumor, and how that
Yeah,
opened up something
it
for
was
you.
interesting. It was interesting. I was told I had only 6 months to live.
Oh,
And I'm talking when I was age 36 and I'm going to be 78 now.
oh,
So, um, yeah, the fear of death is the ultimate fear.
right.
But, and I faced that. So I guess I'm very fortunate because after that, once you face that fear, there's nothing left to fear,
So how did you go
really.
through experience?
The experience was again Swami Vivekananda ji,
Mm-hmm.
who pulled me out. I believe it,
Wonderful.
and it was very strange. I went to Moksha Pranamata ji, who was my guru, who had given me the initiation at Ramakrishna Sharda Mission, Dakshineshwar,
Mm-hmm.
and I told her, um, Thakur, that's Sri Ramakrishna, doesn't want me to. I want to die. I'm going to die, and I'm not going abroad for my treatment. In those days, there was nothing available here in
I
India,
see. Mm-hmm.
right? Nothing available in that condition because it was a suspected,
Tumor.
tumor, which they couldn't really figure out in India. Anyway, so I told her I'm not going because Thakur doesn't care. He doesn't want me to get well. And so if I'm going to die in 6 months, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
She made a very interesting statement. She said, what do you think? Thakur is going to come down as a doctor and treat you? He said, trust the hands of the doctor,
Uh-huh.
right? Because he is watching you, but he will work on you through the hands of the doctor.
Right.
Okay. And that was it. And I decided to go abroad for my treatment. And it worked in a very interesting way. The surgery being suggested was a very dangerous surgery. It was like they didn't have laser in those days, and it
Mm-hmm.
was a question of cutting open the skull and lifting the brain and draining out this tumor. And the
Wow.
doctor gives me this very interesting statistics in the most inhuman manner. I must say, he spoke with me. I asked him, what are the chances? He said, 50% chance of survival. And 50% of that can be that you may become a vegetable.
Mm.
So I said, thank you very much. I don't want the surgery. So he said, then you will die in 6 months. I said, that's fine.
Okay.
And I actually came back to
Oh.
India and went back again later.
Mm-hmm. I
In
see.
the interim, I met, again, you have interesting inputs from people. So there was this tremendous trauma, obviously, that you got only 6 months to live and kids were small and all that kind of thing. I met Dada Jeshan Vaswani. I don't know if you heard of
Yes.
Dada
Yes. Yes.
Vaswani. Yeah? My Guru Bhen, Geeta Veer, she said, Dada, please bless my sister. She's got a brain tumor, and the doctors told her she's got 6 months to live. He said, congratulations, you got 6 months to live. I may die tomorrow. And And that was an interesting statement, right?
Uh-huh.
So he's
Yeah.
saying, you know you've got 6 months to live. None of us know how long we're going to live and how
Uh-huh.
many of us are going to go tomorrow or
Mm.
today. When you have people giving you this kind of support, which is
Mm.
not sympathizing or feeling bad for you or feeling bad with you,
Mm.
but telling you that
Mm.
it's fine to know that, because it's inevitable, and so whether you're going at 36 or 76, it does not matter.
Mm.
When people have that kind of support for you,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot have fear,
Mm.
right?
Right.
And then I was when I was back in the US, and there was this whole battle. I was not going to do the surgery. Again, see how things fall into place. Dr. Naresh Trehan, who's a heart cardiologist, is
Mm-hmm.
also a childhood friend. His sister is my childhood school friend, and so I went to just consult with him,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, "Look, this is what this surgeon is suggesting." He said, "No, you're not going in for this surgery. It's much too dangerous."
Mm-hmm.
And as I told you, I'd already decided that. And then he put me in touch with someone. He said, "This doctor is experimenting with laser."
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
so
I see.
I met him, and he said, I've never done this area, okay,
Mm-hmm.
but I can only promise you that you won't be any worse than what you are today if it doesn't work."
Okay.
So he treated me, and it worked.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that was your probably your first tryst with immense fear and going past it.
Yes, and also I had a near-death experience almost, and I do know that there's nothing to fear.
I see.
You literally do go, as Sri Ramakrishna says, from one room to the next.
I see.
It's
Well,
just the body. It's just the body that'll go. No big
right,
deal.
right, right.
Yeah.
So in today's day and age where we have, I mean, it's almost a cliche to talk about COVID these days, but I mean, the fact of the matter is that it is something which has caused immense, or not caused, but has given rise to a lot of fear in a lot of people, and for people who have not had the kind of very deep experience like you have had. I mean, what would you say to them for someone who's very afraid of COVID and who's not is refusing to step out and not getting on with life? What would you say?
See, it's like this. One is that you don't take chances. You don't get careless. You don't get brazen about taking
Hmm.
care of yourself. Because after all, if we are students of Vedanta, we know that this body is our instrument, our laboratory,
Hmm.
for our spiritual progress. So we have to take care of it,
Of course.
right?
Yeah.
And like Swami Vivekananda talked about the body being a gymnasium, and you just need to take care of it.
Hmm.
So it's not that one gets brazen about it, and it's like the attitude of saying, "Oh, I won't wear a mask because I don't want to,"
Mm-hmm.
or something like that, or
Or I
definitely
won't take
go,
the vaccine.
or whatever. I mean, vaccine is another issue, but a lot of people have done their research and decided that it's
Right.
not necessary. That's a different. I think there are, the
Okay.
opinions
Fair
are
enough.
divided on that. But
Hmm.
the point is that to be careless,
Hmm.
to be reckless, and saying, "Oh, I don't care," is not the attitude in terms of taking care of yourself, of your physical being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But with that, it doesn't have to be with fear. It's
Mm-hmm.
with caution, right?
Right.
So you being careful doesn't mean that you get paranoid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like when I was traveling to UK from Delhi. Initially, there was the restriction that you have to come and get isolated in a hotel. I was not going to do that
Hmm.
because I was not going to spend that kind of money and come and get boxed into a hotel in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment the situation was that you come and get isolated at home, and since I'm visiting my family, my son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter, it was a simple option.
Mm-hmm.
But the care that had to be taken 19 hours on the flight with a mask on was no great fun, but it
Mm.
had to be done, right?
Right. Right.
But you don't stop. You don't uh, close yourself up, jail yourself up at home. This is
Mm-hmm.
how I believe again.
Right.
And but at the same time, I'm not going around to the bazaars and markets and you know
Like life as before. Yeah.
yeah, that's not going to happen. But I don't think any of this should be driven by fear.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be driven by a rational understanding of what the situation is, and all of us are in it all over
Right.
the world.
Yeah.
So
Right.
what is there to fear in that? Yeah, and I have lost very dear friends
Mm.
in this COVID, some members of the extended family as well. That
Mm-hmm.
has happened, but again, if it had to happen, it happened.
Mm.
You
Right.
know, not that you can do much about it.
All right. So, in a sense, the last sentence which you said is it sort of it happens and it is as it is. This kind of drives me towards your book which you co-wrote recently. Right. I have
Yeah.
it here with me for the viewers to see. Wait, oh, it's hidden by my mountains. Never mind.
Okay. Yeah.
So the
No.
title
Yeah.
of the book is "Life is as is." Um,
Yeah. So this is my journey with the Mahabharata, thanks to my very close and dear friend Dr. Kavita Sharma.
okay.
She's a scholar with the Mahabharata. Okay, she's
Mm-hmm.
been an educationist all her life, and uh, whenever we met, our conversation would always go to the epic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fascinating epic, and I had, as I said, read it in Amar Chitra Katha to begin with, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'd read the abridged version of by Kamala Subramaniam, which
Mm-hmm.
is very beautifully written.
Yes. Yes.
But I had not delved into the main Mahabharata,
Mm-hmm.
and the concept was the war, and
Mm-hmm.
then the great television serial of Mahabharata, which one had watched when it
B.R.
was,
Chopra, right? Yeah.
yeah, right. So it had given an insight, but the entire focus has been or was on the war, right?
Mm.
So everyone understood that the Mahabharata meant war, and the Bhagavad Gita as given by Sri Krishna during the war. Okay,
Mm-hmm. Mm.
and when Kavita and I would sit and discuss, we would discuss various aspects. And she had just written this book, Birds, Beasts, Man and Nature, which I, as an individual, independent publisher, did.
I
I
see. Okay.
published it for her. And then she had done also the Queens of the Mahabharata.
Mm-hmm.
So she was looking at these different aspects. And then we were discussing, and she said, I've been thinking of writing on the sages of the Mahabharata.
Mm-hmm.
And we got into these discussions, and she said, let's do this together.
I see.
And so we did. It took us 2.5 years work,
Oh wow.
and to figure out the role the sages play. And there's a plethora of sages in the
Mm.
Mahabharata. So
Mm-hmm.
we took only a few key persons
Mm-hmm.
and their lives and their journeys, and what comes across very clearly that they're as human as we are.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say human, I don't say it in a derogatory way.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean is that we have our faults, we have our weaknesses, and what in Vedanta is taught to us as the six enemies,
Mm.
Kam, Lobh, Moh, Mad, Matsarya, lust, anger,
Anger.
so attachment, expectation, jealousy, envy, all
Greed.
those
Yeah.
factors are called six enemies, right? And
Right.
we all have them. And reading about this and writing about this makes you very conscious that, hey, I have it, all of us have it,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
It's a question of how we are going to control it or we can't control it. And when we
Mm-hmm.
don't control it, the consequences are there.
Mm.
So the cause and effect comes out very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we are vulnerable comes out equally clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And recognition of that, I think, is the first step. Like the step of overcoming fear
Mm-hmm.
is one aspect, recognition of our failings is the other aspect of
Mm.
how we work through life. And to
Indeed.
recognize this helped. So
Right.
we worked on this, and then there was the title that we decided. We were mulling over the title.
Mm.
And the fact that we kept talking about saying, but this is life, this is how it is, you can't change it. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that when you're trying to practice or go on the path of Vedanta, the first thing you learn is that the world is as it is. It's not
Mm-hmm.
changing. Not because I wanted to, it can't be a utopia. It was
Mm-hmm.
never meant to be a utopia. It is what it is. And that's how we came to this title, Life is as is, because actually that's the truth of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we came to this title, and we loved doing the work. It has been well accepted.
Mm-hmm. I see.
We are
I see.
working. We are working on another book, which will
Oh,
take
well,
some time.
before I ask you about that, so if I understand correctly, what if I were to elaborate on your title? I know you wouldn't like that, but when you say life is as is, you're saying as opposed to life being what I want it to be or what I don't want it
What
to be.
I dream about, what I
Right.
wanted to be, the ideal concept of life, and then I realized that there is no ideal concept of life because my thoughts and my mind changes all the time, right?
Correct.
So
Right.
what may seem ideal at age 21 is different at 50 and different at 70 and so on. So do I have a ballpark? Do I have a frame of what is the ideal in life? I don't.
Mm,
None of us does.
mm.
We change it. Our minds change so fast. So how can we have a fixed ideal that, this happily ever after
Right.
concept?
Right.
The
Right.
fact that I've started a business and it has to succeed, it may succeed. It may succeed brilliantly, but it may just collapse the next day.
Mm.
So is there a fixed idea? Do we have one?
I see. I see. So if I
And
understand, sorry.
if we don't, then life is as is. It's going to have its ups and downs.
Right, 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 right. So you're suggesting that it's sort of a movement away from a person of great personal agenda towards a person of more witnessing awareness. Is that?
Absolutely, because there's this concept of moving on. Firstly, knowing that it's a journey.
Mm-hmm,
Life is a journey.
mm-hmm.
It's not a stationary something. As Vivekananda says, you're not going to go to a platform and build a house,
Right,
right?
right, right, right,
So if you recognize that this is a journey,
right.
then you cannot expect permanence with anything. It can be an exciting journey, it can be challenging,
Mm-hmm.
it will have its ups and downs, but the fact that you're traveling is exciting, isn't it?
Right,
So
right.
why not take it like that?
I see.
Of course, at today I can't do most of the things I could do 10 years ago. So that's part of the transition. It's
Mm-hmm.
not something to moan about.
Right,
Yes, I will have aches and pains. I will have situations with my body, but that's a part of the degeneration of the body, and everything that is matter has
right.
to degenerate. Do I? But if I think that I am this body,
Mm.
then I have a problem, right?
Right, right.
Because then I don't know what I'm doing with myself.
Right, right. Well, that's very useful. And as I've been watching the Google Meet window while we've been talking, the number of questions or the people raising hands has really increased as you started talking about the Mahabharata. So I think it might be a good time for us to take a few questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, great,
All
great.
right. So
Sure. I
great.
hope I can answer them, but I'll be happy to
Well, yeah.
hear them out.
Okay. So I see that there is Akanksha who has raised her hand. So Akanksha, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question, or type your question in the chat window. Either works. Akanksha, can you hear us? Yes, please ask your question. Okay, she may be having audio video issues. So let's move on.
Akansha Mishra, she's mute.
Uh,
So you have to unmute yourself. I don't see her anymore.
yeah. Okay, so we have another person, Maruti Prasad. You have a question. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, namaste to Indu Mata and
Namaskar.
Professor.
Please
I,
call me Indu. I'm not a Mata by any standards.
okay. Thank you, thank you.
Yes,
Uh,
Maruti, tell me. Yeah.
yeah, Induji, it is like this regarding this karma when we are speaking about. Like in this karma, I would like to understand whether this ancestors karma, whether it will be followed to the people who are down the line, like the next generation, and whether it follows with them.
I that's an interesting question that you brought up about karma. Um, why are you worried about what follows? Why aren't we dealing with what there is today? We know that everything is cause and effect. And so, why don't we just deal with what comes in our way at this moment? For example, when we were talking about fear, we only talked about the ultimate fear of death. But look at our lives. Everything is moving with fear. You study for an exam, your fear is not the study, the fear is the result, the outcome. If you're, I mean, a simple thing like cooking, as Uday mentioned, I love cooking, but what is the anxiety about when you're cooking? How will it taste? Will everyone like it? Will they appreciate it? So look at what in our day-to-day life we are following exactly what Sri Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, that you are doing your karma, but you're looking at the result. If you don't look at the result and you do whatever you're doing, it's a journey. It's a wonderful experience to be doing something because you want to do it. And so, why don't we live in the present and deal with that and not worry about what I do today will have consequences tomorrow and will have consequences for my family in the next generation? Come on, we stop living then if you're going to worry so much. Have no fears and live in the present. That's my philosophy. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes. I understood very clearly. Thank you very much, Hinduji.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So, anybody else with questions? Now is a good time to just go ahead, unmute yourself, and ask your question.
I did want to, Uday, we talked about fear and this question
Right.
on karma came up, and this concept of cause and effect is so important. This concept of fear, we fear everything.
Mm.
You brought it up in terms of the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate fear of getting COVID and what are the consequences, and then reading about it and saying, oh, when you get COVID, your heart can get affected and your lungs can get affected, and it does this and it does that. Just worrying about all that,
Mm.
I think, is ruining the moment for me.
Mm.
If you do get it, and there's so many so many who have
Mm.
had COVID and come out of it, there are others who haven't. The point is that being anxious and over cautious and worried is not the way to walk through life.
Mm.
And this is where fear of any kind,
Mm-hmm.
and this is related to the concept of cause and effect. Everything has a cause, everything has an effect. We live with that combination,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And so why don't we take it in our stride and move on? I mean, you had the most erudite speakers as Swami Mahamedhanandaji speaking very regularly to
Right.
VSC Madras. You had Swami Sarvapriyanandaji.
Right.
You've heard Devanand Pranamataji.
Right.
You have Vivek Pranamataji. So you have so many erudite speakers who you've been connected with. This circle VSC has been connected with. You don't need Gyan or Vedanta, right?
Right.
But as a practical aspect, I find that the simplest thing of dealing with cause and effect, living in the moment, taking everything as a journey is so important.
Right. Right. Yes, absolutely. So, while we wait for other questions to come up, so viewers, you can just raise your hand and ask your question after that. You were telling us about a follow-up book that you are planning to write. Tell us a little bit more about that.
That's very much a work in progress. We have Kavita and I just keep discussing and writing.
Uh-huh.
And we're looking at the aspect we're looking at is that the Mahabharata has a very interesting thing to teach us, and that is immortality and mortality. It talks of these two aspects,
Mm-hmm.
right? And immortality going beyond mortality or vice versa. We're working on that aspect, that
I
what
see.
the consequences of war are in contemporary world and what they can be and what they were in that time, and how do human beings, the protagonists in the Mahabharata, what are their characters and how they've come up. It's really a big work in progress. We
I
haven't
see.
even honed into where we'll finally put it down. We just keep writing and exchanging thoughts at the
I
moment.
see. Well, that's wonderful. Sometime down the line, I'm sure we'll get a wonderful little book out of it.
Yeah, hopefully.
Meanwhile, there is a viewer who's asked a question in the chat. Santosh has asked a question, so I'll just read it out. He says, "Hello, Induji. How to choose our career according to our passion, or should we just do the job we don't like?"
Ah, That's interesting, because doing a job you don't like means you're looking at only the security of a job, yeah, which is very important. The income from the job, which is very important. And I can tell you that a huge percentage of working people are doing a job they don't like.
Mm.
Okay, because it is, as I mentioned, the security and the income.
Right.
Um, I was fortunate that I was able to go into a stream which I enjoyed,
Mm.
book publishing. But it wasn't something from the top of my hat. It was just happened to be available, and I could pick it up. But following your passion is important, but you don't lose the balance,
Mm.
right? So if you're going into, if you have responsibilities, you have families, you have commitments, then that job and the income is very important. That does not mean that you cannot pursue your passion. That does not mean that you can't live a parallel life and do something simultaneously. It's possible, and you can do it. And then if you feel that the time is right and you can change tracks, nothing to stop you. I don't think in today's day and age changing tracks is difficult.
Mm.
Many people do it and they can do it. But yes, the security and the
Here again.
fear again of what will happen if it doesn't work out is going to stop you. You need to
Right.
analyze that are you willing to face the fear? Are you willing to take the plunge? Are you willing to risk things? And if you feel that you can find that kind of a path and you can balance it, go ahead.
Right. Yes, so this is a question. Okay, yeah, yeah. Santosh says thank you so much. I mean, this is a question that many students who are about to graduate from IIT or are contemplating what to do next. This is a question that they all face. That their interests are in one direction, the money is in another direction, and how does one go about it?
Yeah, and I remember you spoke 2 months ago
Mm-hmm.
on being taking the subjective
Subjective,
approach.
right?
That answers a lot of the questions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That are you treating yourself as an object,
Mm-hmm.
or are you treating yourself? Are you aware that you are the subject? And I think that makes you change the perspective completely
Right.
as to which direction you're taking your life. Are
Right.
you the observer of your life, or aren't you?
Mm.
It's like, how seriously we are taking life also. We think this world, this life that we are living is the absolute and the only truth,
Mm.
don't we?
Yes.
And do we know that there are other stages? Are we aware that our dreams and our deep sleep are equally important, but we've not thought about them? I spoke a few months ago with some students in a college in Bombay,
Mm-hmm.
and the only thing I asked was that do we fall off asleep, or do we go to sleep?
Mm.
Falling off asleep is one of those abstract, I mean, those things you're watching television and you drop off, or you're
Right.
reading a book and you go off to sleep with your specs on also. And it's just the fatigue of the body which makes you sleep.
Right.
But do you plan and go to sleep and say, okay, now what does it mean? I want to go into deep sleep. I want to switch off my mind. I want to go into a deep sleep mode, which means that all the happenings of today and the past so many days have to stop, and I don't have to think of what I'm doing the next day,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So, do we plan on going to sleep?
Mm.
Our scriptures and our teachers tell us about prayer before going to sleep. What is the concept? The concept is that you're putting your focus on something beyond the day-to-day activities of the day that's over and the day that's coming.
Mm.
And you try and touch something within yourself. The moment you do that, the quality of sleep is totally different.
Mm.
And one of these girls, the students whom I had this Zoom chat with, she got back to me a few days later and she said, "Ma'am, I've had the most rare experience in the last 2 3 days when I've planned to go to sleep,
How
and
nice.
I've slept so deeply and so wonderfully." And that's when the third that dimension of what deep sleep does for you, to give
I
you a
see.
little understanding of what you really are. And so you witness your deep sleep. So get to closer to this concept of being the witness of your own life,
Right. Yeah.
which is what is taught to us, correct?
Yeah. So it's a very practical way of seeing what has been taught. And
Yeah, so plan on going to sleep. Don't just fall
all
asleep.
of it. So on a related note, I see there's a question from one of the viewers, Deeksha, who says, "Hello, ma'am. How do you stay motivated in difficult and low times? Like, yes, the journey is going to be challenging and nothing is permanent, but how do we keep our spark without getting sad and depressed? What can we practice?"
Uh, Fearlessness.
Mm,
When times are low, when you call of low times, what is it that is giving you that feeling of low? Because
mm,
you are afraid.
mm,
You're afraid of where you're heading. You're afraid of the disaster that's overtaken you. You're afraid that you won't come out of it.
mm,
And these are the kind of despondent thoughts which lead people to taking extreme steps, correct?
mm.
It's
Right.
the fear which overcomes you, and you really feel that you can't come out of it. So face the fear.
Mm,
As Swami Vivekananda said, say, face the brutes,
right.
right? So if it's there, don't get overwhelmed. We can't afford to be overwhelmed. You have to move on. You have to take the next step.
Mm,
So the dynamism is from within us. And we say, okay, this is the situation. It's bad. It's terrible. But am I going to wallow in this, or am I going to find an option? And the
mm,
moment I sit up and look for an option, it will come
mm,
because it's all within us.
mm,
It's not sitting there outside. The option is also within us. The thinking is also within us. The understanding is ours. So the experience is ours. Why can't we harness all that for ourselves
right.
and get it together? And we can. It's tough. Nobody's saying it's not tough. But then life is not meant to be easy. It's a challenge. It is a journey. So why can't we just take it that way?
Right.
I
Right.
hope that helps.
Right. Well, we have seems like a follow-up question from Sharmila Didi. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi Indu and hello Uday.
Hello.
I wanted to ask Indu, does she have any plans of writing a book on Vedanta?
Oh my God, please. You got, I'm still a student, for heaven's sake. There's no way that I can write a book on Vedanta. I'm still
Yeah.
studying, still studying. I'm still learning. I
Then
have
let,
written few articles, as you know. Those are just my thoughts, and I keep expressing them. That's as far as I can go.
you should write a book on the lessons you have learned from Vedanta.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm sharing now. And okay, I'll write a few more articles. Book? No way. Not going to happen. I am still trying to read the complete works yet again, complete works of Swamiji yet again. And I think that is our exercise. We don't need to write books, we need to read them.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
Sharmila. Thanks for the support.
Bye.
Wonderful. Okay. Any other questions from the viewers? Uh, okay, there's a raised hand. Shweta, please go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, hi
Hi,
Indu.
Shweta. Hi.
So I found this idea that you discussed very important about planning to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So what about extending this idea and planning for death? I think this is a very important question, especially in our current times where there's so much uncertainty and panic around COVID. So would you like to elaborate on that?
Well, sure. Many erudite speakers have talked about this prepare for death. And the mind kind of goes into a deep freeze, saying, what? Especially when we're talking to on this forum where there are so many young people.
Yes.
You tell a young person saying, plan on death, and say, are you crazy? I've got my entire life to look forward to. But it's a sobering thought that to remember and recall that it's one of the most inevitable events in our lives, right? That being born, and the other side of the coin is that we'll die. And this, therefore, is this slated journey which has a starting point. It's like our interview today. It has a starting time and it has a closing time. You're not going to extend that, right? So the point is that there is no extensions here. And we have, whether we believe in fate or destiny or karma, there is no way of knowing this one particular point, right? The point of closure. We know when we want to read a book and we decide that, okay, I'm going to read these 15 chapters in the next 15 days. And I know that if I don't do it in 15 days, I'll extend it to 16 days or 17 days. But if I have an exam, I know that I've got to get everything completed by that particular day. And then it is take what comes. If we look at life as a transition, if we look at our body as not that something that I am, but it is my instrument, this is where the essence lies, Shweta. And we see ourselves as this body-mind complex. We are totally and absolutely identified with it. So anything happens to the body, the fear of death has to overcome me. But if I know that this is my instrument to be used to the best of my ability, and I am the witness who's not getting affected at all, and this is what is being taught to us in the each and every scripture, in each and every religion possibly, but definitely in Hinduism and definitely in Vedanta, that this body is destructible, but it's not me. Now, if my identity with the body was to change, and I were to see it as my most useful laboratory in which I am here to do my work and to identify my goal and to move towards it, then I think this obsessive attachment to it will decrease. And once that decreases, we are preparing ourselves to say, okay, we move on physically as well. This is my approach. I don't know whether it answers your question, but it is the only way I think that we stop identifying with our body as being me. It isn't me, right? So once I can get to that, I think the fear of losing it will not be so overwhelming.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question, Indu.
Hi,
Hi.
Sunil.
Hi, Uday.
Hello.
So it sounds very simplistic. I teach a media course in Bombay, and every year now, last 1.5 years, these kids have been doing online classes with us. And the whole idea is that I keep trying to take them through when you don't look at others, don't observe others first, start watching yourself. And that little inward journey, I try to take them through that. Uh, they hear me out, they nod their heads, and then they say, but ma'am, it sounds very theoretical. How and where do we start by watching ourselves? So, despite the explanations, it doesn't really stay with them. So, how does one start watching oneself? Is what their question is always.
Um, do we realize that we are always talking to ourselves in our minds? That we ask ourselves the questions and we find the answers, or we seek the answers. We don't necessarily vocalize them and ask each other. All the time we are questioning things and we are trying to resolve and find the answers, aren't we? And we know that, but we don't pay attention to it. Our mind is the questioner and our mind is the answering machine. And the questions are coming from a deeper level, right? Are we recognizing where they're coming from? So we don't pay attention to our minds. We don't pay attention. It's like, when everyone says, when you sit down to meditate, all these thoughts rush in and we are supposed to ignore them. The fact remains that we don't succeed in ignoring them, right? And so we get overwhelmed by them. But those are irrelevant. I wouldn't say irrelevant, but that's an uncontrolled thought process. It's like Sri Ramakrishna said, we leave all our doors and windows open and there is no control. So the first thing that comes is the control of the thought process and then sifting out our thoughts. And if we are concentrated, if we are focused, we find the answers within ourselves. And I think that one of these questions of that all that we read and all that we hear is theoretical. We don't know how to apply it because we do not actually ask ourselves or listen to ourselves. We don't listen to what our mind is actually telling us. We are only overwhelmed by the turbulence of the mind and the restlessness. We don't calm ourselves down to listen. And if we were to listen to ourselves, we would find a lot of answers. For example, this Vivekananda one statement, she said, we have this habit of acting first, maybe thinking, and listening doesn't even happen. Whereas as she said, and as our scripture says, listen, reflect, and then act. Now, I know these are split-second events, right? Microseconds when you listen, absorb, and act. But do we, even after action, think about it? That I acted in this particular way, and why did I do it? We don't. So the question is, we are not listening to ourselves. And if we are not listening to ourselves, then we obviously listening to someone else who's, outside of us becomes even more difficult when it is that someone telling us this is what is the right way and this is the wrong way and this is what religion says and this is what our philosophy says. We're not registering it because we're not answering ourselves. We're not listening to ourselves. This is what I think.
Well,
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead, Sunena.
Can I ask a corollary to that? So, what I personally feel, Induji, is that I think stemming from what you said that we're not listening to ourselves is, yes, that's right. And because we're not listening, the questions don't arise.
Huh?
And when we tell them, okay, now schools are over and your whatever college is over, and now start asking questions, they find it very difficult to ask questions.
Okay, now you take another thing, what we get overwhelmed with. We made a mistake, okay? And it cost me money, it cost me a relationship, it cost me something major which was very important to me. I have two options: that keep going back to it and cursing myself for it, or berating myself for it, or saying, okay, it happened. At that time, at that point of time, I was sincere in what I was doing. I didn't know I was making a mistake because, no one knowingly makes a mistake, right? Unless you're an adept, whatever, you want to make that mistake deliberately. But the point is that at any point when we act, we are doing it with sincerity and understanding. And then in retrospect, we feel it was wrong because something went wrong. The cause was there and the result was totally unexpected and it was disastrous. Do I need to keep berating myself and going back to it? No, but it has to be my learning. We're not ready to learn. We repeat our memory. We go down memory lane only to relive situations. And maybe if they're happy, yes, it's fine. But if they've been sad, we only keep cursing ourselves or the other person or the situation or the event. We do not shut it off and learn from it. Now, to say that I've forgotten it doesn't happen. It's there. It's there in our conscious, subconscious, unconscious mind. But if we have dealt with it and faced it, that's the only way we can move forward. So the same thing, when you say we don't listen to ourselves, is because we're clouding our mind and thinking with so many unnecessary thought processes, which we haven't discarded. We haven't moved on. And if we don't move on, it's not possible to listen to ourselves, forget about paying attention to anything even outside. We create this mental cocoon in which we tie ourselves up so completely that nothing else can penetrate. It's like making a cocoon of my body-mind complex and saying, this is me, and not recognizing the fact that I am a universal being. I am part of this entire universe. I am in this body and mind, but I am not the body and mind. So when we look at these thought processes and process them, I think we are opening our mind out to a little better understanding.
Okay.
Thank you, Indu. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
So
Sunena.
This is related to a question which has come on the chat, and this is probably drawing towards an end now. There's a student Anant who asks, he says that, Namaste ma'am, how can we go about experiencing the fact that our body is just a laboratory and similar things? He says he understands it on an intellectual level, but is there a way to experience it?
Okay, are you taking exams or are you working on some project where it requires your 100% attention? Of course you must be. There are various points in our lives when we have that. Think about it in retrospect. How much attention did you pay to your body? None. You sat still, studied, or worked, finished a project, probably spent sleepless nights. Your body was not important. You forgot about your hunger, you forgot about your thirst, but you functioned, right? So if you functioned that way, that means your body was not taking precedence over you. You were something else. Your body, your thought process, your intellect was at a different level. And that was because of your focused attention. And now, see the attention we pay to our body. We pay attention to our body, and aren't some of us over attentive where our body goes, where our body is concerned? And the moment we are paying attention to it, it of course has to take paramount importance for us. So it's a question of attention, focus, knowing the utility, and then working on. My body is important. Of course, I am using this body-mind complex, but how about changing my terminology and not saying I am this body-mind complex? This identity crisis that we create for ourselves, or this identity mistake that we create for ourselves, is, I think, the crux of the problem. And practically, just watch yourself and see how much attention we are paying to it at what point of time. When you go to the gym and you exercise, or any routine of exercising, walking, etc., of course you're focusing on the body and its health. But what about the health of the mind? And the health of the mind cannot be confused with the health of the body. So look at our thought process. The moment we change attention and change our focus of attention, the body ceases to be that important. And the moment we can practice that, we are actually treating this life as a journey, and we are moving forward without this entire obsession with the body-mind complex. Have I answered your question?
I think he's gonna. Yes, he says thanks a lot, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Anand.
Wonderful. So I think these are very useful and very practical words from you, Indu Didi. And
Thank you.
I think we got a message from Maharaj who said that he thanks you for sharing your wisdom with us. He has to leave to join the Mahasnana Thakur, so he had to leave. And I think we've had a wonderful conversation, and probably it's time to bring it to a close. Folks in India can go have their lunch, and you can probably go have breakfast.
Yes.
Is there any final words you'd like to leave us with? The one thing that will help people overcome everything.
Okay. Firstly, I must thank you, Uday, for this opportunity.
Oh,
it's been
pleasure.
great fun. It's great fun. And I'm glad we were able to share some thoughts. I think this concept of faith, the concept of belief systems, if they've been well thought out, and if we can create this combination of removing superstition and really believing and understanding, because then our journey becomes that much easier. And experience, as Advaita Vedanta talks about experience and experiencing life, and that the reality is how much reality you want to give it. So if this world is real for us, we have to know its relative existence. It's real up to a point. It can't be absolute. So once we don't take this world as absolute, we don't take this life as absolute, and if we realize there are other states of consciousness, and be aware of them, practice, and all our teachers teach us, and that's individual, that's personal. And But the fact that we use this as our working base, it's like creating that working background in which you function. I think we need to look at having true faith, having real belief systems, and trusting ourselves, having the self-confidence to trust ourselves. Then we can trust others.
Right. So Shweta and I were just talking this morning, the wonderful poem of Kabir, which starts with Moko kahan dhoonde re, which ends in Main to Vishwas mein, right?
Right, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Indu Didi. Namaste.
Namaste, and thank you everyone for being here. It's been a great experience. Thank you.